In the Perspectrum podcast, we discuss controversial topics. Outside of this context, Michael and I are both working professionals. While doing the show, we are not acting as agents or representatives of our respective institutions, and none of the views that we express reflect the outlooks of our employers. So don't come to my office and throw toilet paper at me.
And I don't have an office, but don't come to my cube. Hello and welcome to the Perspectrum. I'm Michael Bloom.
And I'm Nathan Seelove.
We have a great episode for you this week. We unfortunately did not keep the trend going of keeping Trump out of our mouths. Boy, that's awful. Of keeping Trump policies off of our show. In fact, today it's pretty much all about Trump and the shit he's pulling.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, we did a segment on Elon Musk and his corruption, and really as an example of a lot of the corruption present in the Trump administration. But the corruptor-in-chief is, especially in the news recently, really at the forefront of the corruption conversation. And so we wanted to talk about some of those stories and the trends of corruption that really he is at the head of. And for our second segment, we want to understand if Trump shares something in common with a huge mythical giant. And we're going to ask, Fezzik, did you do something right? Specifically, we want to talk about Trump's proposals around bringing down pharmaceutical prices, which is obviously a hobby horse of this show. And we're curious to get into understanding if that really is going to happen and if this will be actually like a bright spot in the Trump administration.
And that segment might somewhat surprise some of you. Not extremely surprise you, but somewhat. Aspects of it. We'll see. We'll see where we go. But for now, bro, corruption.
Dude, the corruption. Okay.
Dude, we love the corruption, okay?
Yeah.
We love the corruption. They're great people.
Money. I love money. So, guys, it is illegal to accept bribes. Let's start there. It's literally in the Constitution. There's two provisions of the U.S. Constitution that place restrictions on the president receiving emoluments or gifts from foreign governments. So one of the provisions is focused on foreign governments, and then one is focused on receiving domestic gifts, and specifically, Congress has to approve any gift from a prince, king, or foreign state.
Well, but hold on, Michael. Hold on, Michael.
Yeah.
The emoluments clause refers to foreign governments.
Sure.
Which presumably the bribery clause only applies to domestic because it doesn't specifically say foreign. So like, because this is a bribery from a foreign government, it's actually legal.
Wow, my God, you are a legal genius. The loopholes. So those are literally in the fucking Constitution because our founders were like, you know what, this is probably going to be a problem. And then there are other like rules and laws governing this stuff as well. Specifically, one is the Foreign Gifts and Decorations Act, which sets out requirements for how the president can receive gifts. Specifically, the president is in fact allowed to receive gifts from foreign actors with a max value of $480. Okay. And anything above that, it has to be accepted on behalf of the United States, and the U.S. government retains ownership. So just full stop right out there, it is illegal to accept gifts over $480 from, as a president, especially from foreign actors.
Well, dude, I got good news for you then.
Yeah.
Because I was just doing a cursory glance. Like I will admit I'm a little dyslexic, but I was doing a cursory glance about this plane that everybody's raising a stink about, and it turns out it's only $400. So
great.
we're good. We're good. Like it's well below that 480. You said 480.
480, plenty.
480. Yeah. Well below that.
Man.
Oh wait, shit. Hold on. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That's $400 million.
Yeah, $400 million. So yeah, just a million times.
Oh shit,
the limit.
Okay, that is a little bit more than 480.
Yes.
Shit. Sorry, that was my bad. Dyslexia.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. At first, I also thought the Qatari government was giving him a paper plane, but we should definitely get in.
Wait. Hold on. Have you ever Have you ever received a paper airplane that was worth $480?
Okay, like a gold-plated paper airplane. That's exactly up
A
Trump's alley.
gold-plated one. How would that fly if it's made of gold? Like, gold's like what? One of the heaviest metals?
Well, Trump has a really good gold guy, so I'm sure he can get to figure it. He can figure it out. He's got the best people. So we should definitely get into the whole plane thing because I think that's a really important case. But I kind of want to end on that one because it is the one in the news right now and getting a lot of people's attention. But it's far from kind of the first of the like multi-million-dollar bribes that Trump has essentially been paid. So like I think it is important, but I don't know that it takes the cake for his like worst corruption so far.
I mean, that is a bold claim.
I know.
That is a bold claim.
We're gonna try to support it. So
all right, let's see.
So during his first term, Trump, as we recall, Trump broke with tradition and refused to divest from the Trump Organization or to create a blind trust. A blind trust basically enables you to retain ownership while not being able to control the company or the assets. Still probably a conflict of interest because especially with like a real estate company, the things you can do as a president might be able to personally benefit you. But he didn't even go so far as to like, step away from controlling his particular assets. However, he and his family, they did sign an ethics pact where they agreed to not strike deals with foreign governments and foreign companies during his administration.
Yeah, but they also had Trump hotels in Washington, D.C., which foreign dignitaries were staying in and paying the Trump administration for. And they were doing that the first day that he was inaugurated. Like at the time, I was arguing in 2017 when he first took office, the very first day, they should have immediately filed articles of impeachment on the emoluments clause because he was fucking violating it on his first day in 2017.
Absolutely. And the fact that they had to book hotel rooms in order to directly put money into his personal pocket looks like absolute like altar boy level shit compared to the level and directness of the bribery that is now at place in his administration. So this time around, he and his family didn't even like commit to a pact where they're not doing business deals with foreign organizations or foreign governments. They literally have multiple deals in progress that we're going to like talk through. And even Trump Jr. and his business partners have even set up basically a very expensive membership only club specifically for this purpose. It is called the Executive Branch in Washington, D.C. And basically it's a $500,000 per person membership cost, basically so rich people can like literally influence the Trump administration directly right at home. So Jesus Christ. But that's more of like a laughable example. In order to get to like the worst examples, we have to start by talking about our least favorite topic here on the Perspectrum, cryptocurrency. No, we kind of ride on the Trump train. No, we got to talk about cryptocurrency. So I know it sucks. So back in 2019, the heyday of ethics in the United States, Trump was actually a huge critic of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. Not a nuanced critic. I don't think he really understood them. But he said, quote, "I'm not a fan of Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, which are not money, whose value is highly volatile and based on thin air." And he said in a series of social media posts, quote, "Unregulated crypto assets can facilitate unlawful behavior, including drug trade and other illegal activity." And we can only assume that when he made that statement, that was him getting an idea. So that was him back in 2019. And yet he appears to have totally changed his mind as part of this campaign back in 2024 when he realized that he could make money off of it. Last year, he pledged to transform the United States into the, quote, "the crypto capital of the planet." And the crypto industry spent tens of millions of dollars to get him elected, including donating $18 million to his inauguration fund. And so maybe you're thinking Trump, is a stand-up guy and like he's just doing that because crypto is the way of the future. Or it's because right around that time, Trump's sons, and like with him having a direct financial interest, launched a cryptocurrency firm called World Liberty Financial, literally in September before he got elected. And they essentially launched a Trump meme coin. Well, really, it's a stable coin, whose value is like supposed to be pegged to the value of the dollar. And essentially, what it allows is a couple of things. One, transfers of this meme coin are totally anonymous. So, just with all crypto, just like with all cryptocurrency, you can pay anyone, anything, and it can be traced, but it can't be traced back to you. Two, by launching this coin and establishing this on the exchange, they set it up so that they would, one, hold the vast majority of the coins. So if they could do things to elevate the value of the coin, it would increase their total value and they would make money. And then on top of that, 75% of the transaction fees, which scale with the amount of a purchase of this coin, go to the Trump organization and the Trump family. So basically what we have here is a currency where all people, like all someone has to do in order to directly put money into Trump's pocket is exchange some money into a cryptocurrency and then pull it back out again. So whereas before they had to at least rent a hotel room, now they can literally just put money into his pocket. And so according to Bloomberg, the total value of Trump's crypto empire at this point is nearly $1 billion. So they're making tons of money off this. And it's one thing to say, hypothetically, they could be influenced by foreign actors as a result of this. Except we have multiple examples of people actually trying to do this because yes, it's anonymous. And so that makes it really hard to track and even more problematic from a bribery standpoint. But some companies have literally just come out and said that they're buying a bunch of this and trying to influence Trump. So literally foreign investors, or I should say investors from foreign countries, have openly admitted that they would like to influence the president by stocking up on this meme coin, including there's this one tiny TikTok e-commerce company, right, with ties to the Chinese government and no revenue. So it's clearly just a shell that somehow secured funding to buy $300 million of this Trump coin.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Coincidentally, at the same time as the president is seeking a deal that would allow TikTok to keep operating in the U.S. So literally holding up TikTok regulation at the same time as being bribed by TikTok.
And look, I don't agree with the TikTok ban, but if you're going to get rid of the TikTok ban or whatnot, or not have a TikTok ban or fight against it or whatnot, it shouldn't be because you were fucking bribed.
Exactly. And Trump was, again, a vocal opponent of TikTok.
Until,
suddenly is not.
Yeah, I wonder if one has something to do with the other.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's not enough, the absurdity of this shit keeps fucking going. So last week, Trump announced on Truth Social that the top 220 investors in the Trump coin would get to attend a, quote, intimate private dinner with the president, literally selling access to the president. And the top 25 would get a private, VIP White House tour, literally selling access to the White House. And buyers, in response to this, spent over $140 million to buy this Trump coin in order to get access here. With top spenders spending as much as 16.5, top spending individuals spending as much as $16.5 million in order to be able to access the president of the United States. It's impossible to know who owns these wallets. We literally don't know, and Trump has not put out a list of the people that will be attending this dinner and have paid to access the president.
So, y'all remember when there was end-to-end 24-hour coverage about fucking Hunter Biden?
Yeah.
Y'all remember that?
Yeah.
And y'all remember how when the investigations actually came out, when the evidence actually came out, literally the only there was the fact that Hunter Biden definitely got his position in Burisma because his last name was Biden, which, yeah, that's fucked up. That's
Yeah.
nepotism.
Yeah. But
But,
he's a
like,
Nepo baby.
But he's a Nepo baby. He's
Yeah.
a Nepo baby. You know, and like, here's the thing. If every single thing that they had initially accused Biden of, you know, in terms of
Influence
Hunter
peddling.
Biden,
Yeah.
influence peddling, Hunter Biden using basically his position on Burisma to try to influence Joe Biden in order to have policies that are more favorable towards them. Even if every single one of those was completely right, completely correct, completely verified,
Mm-hmm.
it would still not even hold a fucking candle to Donald Trump right now.
Yeah. And that is, we have now like scratched the surface of the level of corruption we're talking about. Because, like, remember, Trump was against cryptocurrency, then realized he could make money off it. And since then, the Trump administration has disbanded the Justice Department unit that is dedicated to investigating cryptocurrency crimes. They have declared that, like, quote unquote meme coins, which are derived from cryptocurrency, are no longer subject to any regulatory oversight. And they have agreed to pause a fraud case against a top crypto mogul after he bought $75 million of these Trump tokens. And now is time for the real shit to start, because earlier this month, things started to get serious. We're no longer talking about just, you know,
things started to get serious.
Wealthy
things
individuals.
started to get serious.
We're like influencing the president. We're no longer talking about like foreign companies trying to influence the president. Now we're starting to talk about real money, because earlier this month, the New York Times reported that a venture fund from the United Arab Emirates, which is backed by the government of Abu Dhabi, so literally like direct influence from a foreign government, was using the Trump organization's coins in order to make a $2 billion business deal. There's no reason to do this except to line their pockets, right? It's an exchange of currency, right? You would make this deal with money, except if you could also bribe someone else with the transaction fees at the same time. So the Emirati firm MGX will be using World Liberty Financial's stablecoin to make a deal with Binance, which is the world's largest crypto exchange, and with Binance, like, at the same time attempting to get Trump to issue the founder a pardon because he's been involved in violating money laundering laws. And so literally like a $2 million of transaction value will be going through Trump's firm in order to line his pockets. And Zach Witkoff, who's the co-founder of the Trump crypto firm, also the son of Steve Witkoff, the president's envoy to the Middle East, said that this is only the beginning. Yeah. So,
wow.
that's just them directly paying him. At the same time, Trump recently embarked on his one of his first trips to the Middle East of this administration. He happened to stop at 3 countries in which his family is currently negotiating business deals.
Oh.
Yeah, including Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE.
Oh, I'm shocked to find that when you bribe somebody,
Yeah,
they do stuff for you.
Well, that's
I'm just like it blows my mind. It blows my mind that this is the guy that people have created a cult around.
I know.
You know, like he is so obviously corrupt. He is so comically corrupt. He is so comically elitist. How the fuck is this the guy that you're worshiping? How is this the guy who, like, this is the hill that you want to die on?
I know.
This guy? Really? This guy?
Not only the hill you want to die on, the hill you want to kill all the rest of us on as well. Yeah, dude, it's so funny. I bet you don't even realize that you are echoing the talking point of a political strategist and former communications director from the Republican National Committee. You absolute lib. or wait, what are left-wing people called? Or right-wing people? I don't think I have any slurs for right-wing people.
I don't know, right-wingers? I
don't think that's it.
Right-winger?
Yeah, anyway.
MAGA.
He said, quote, "They obviously see that if you reward Donald Trump with gifts, that may pay off down the road." Yeah, totally. So with that, let's talk a little bit about Qatar. You're like, do we have to?
I mean, at this point, I'm so fucking depressed. Okay, so y'all have already probably heard of this story, but the government of Qatar or Qatar, I've heard it pronounced various different ways. Yeah. Honestly, so Donald Trump even kind of made it a point to be like, is it Qatar? Is it Qatar? I don't know. They all say it's right. And I was like, you know what? This is one of the few times in which I actually kind of relate to you.
All right, add that to the list of things that Trump has done well. You can count them on one hand.
But anyway, so the government of Qatar is one of the biggest supporters of international terrorism of any government in the Middle East. This is a government that has ties to Hamas. This is a government that has ties to Hezbollah. This is a government that has ties to the Houthis. And look, you know, we've had conversations about those groups before, about some of the nuances with those groups before, but at the end of the day, they are terrorist organizations.
Yeah,
all right,
totally.
They're terrorist organizations that do terrorism, and nominally, they're supposed to be organizations that Trump is against.
And he even said himself, like a few years ago, he said he called Qatar, quote, a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
He also criticized the Clinton administration for basically like having quid pro quo schemes with Qatar. But here he is accepting a $400 million luxury plane.
Yep.
And then going around and saying to people like, oh, well, you'd be an idiot not to do it.
Yeah.
You'd be an idiot not to do it. I mean, if someone gave you a plane, you know, you'd be an idiot not to accept it. It's like, no, bro, but it's a fucking bribe.
Yes.
It's a fucking bribe. And they seem to think that because he's accepting this bribe out in the open, that doesn't make it a bribe.
Mike Johnson, like, literally fucking said that.
Yeah. That's not how it works.
Yeah.
That's not how any of this shit works. All right. He's like, oh, my attorney general, Pam Bondi, she signed off on it. So I guess that means it's legal. Hey, you know what? You know what else about Pam Bondi? Before she was in the Trump administration, she was a lobbyist for a country. And let me just look up what that country was. Oh, it was Qatar. She was a lobbyist for Qatar, and she was making over $100,000 a month as a lobbyist, where she would go to Congress and argue for Qatar's interests. You think she might have a bit of a conflict of interest? You think that she might not be the most reliable person to say whether or not it is okay to accept a $400 million plane from a foreign government that funds international terrorism?
Yeah. Can I say I'm not a fan of the Qatari government. Again, they fund terrorism. But part of me has to give them a little bit of kudos to get Trump from Qatar funds terrorism all the way to, like, I love these guys with like, I mean, money well spent, I guess, from their perspective. Like the Trump organization has a deal right now to build a luxury golf resort in Qatar. So pretty, you know, obviously a good get, obviously building that conflict of interest. As you mentioned, Pam Bondi, lobbyist for Qatar, paid $115,000 a month for her work with the Qatari government. Oh, yeah. And FBI Director Kash Patel happened to fail to disclose on his personal financial information to the Senate that he was a consultant for the Qatari government, for the embassy of Qatar in the U.S. Oh, yeah. And Susan Wiles, Trump's chief of staff, also lobbied for the Qatari government. Oh, yeah. And Mike Huckabee, now the U.S. ambassador to Israel, was paid $50,000 to visit Qatar in 2018. Oh, yeah. And Steve Witkoff, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, has also been paid off by the Qatari government. Oh, yeah. And Qatar's foreign...
We're so fucked.
I know. Qatar's sovereign wealth fund
fucked.
bought a hotel from Witkoff's company in 2023 for $623 million. So they have this country was not on anybody's radar, essentially. Well, not
nobody
anybody.
even knew how it was pronounced.
Exactly, until the corruption and stuff with like FIFA putting the World Cup there, and now all of a sudden they're everywhere, man. Pretty impressive. And now they will successfully scoop Boeing for for the next Air Force One. So that's what Trump is claiming. Right.
And at this point, even Republican politicians are kind of looking at this and being like, you sure you want to do that, buddy?
Yeah.
Like, there have been Republican politicians who have been expressing concerns over the fact that, like, are they going to have fucking surveillance equipment on this thing?
Yeah.
Like, how are you going to make sure that this plane is secure?
Yes.
I mean, for all you know, they bugged the whole goddamn thing. So there are concerns about that. Obviously, there are concerns about conflicts of interest. Mm-hmm. Some Republicans who have been kind of trying to lightly push back at it have basically just been like, oh, well, obviously we know that Trump isn't corrupt, but this could potentially give the possibly potential impression that, there might be some iffy things going on there. And we want to prevent that impression. Here's the thing, though. Those things are happening.
Yes.
All right? Like, his cabinet is chock full of people who have ties to the Qatari government. All right? And the thing is, the sad part is that it almost feels like we're at the point where the Trump's base is still not going to give a shit about this.
Yeah.
They're still going to be completely all in on Trump. Now, this might potentially sway some of the Biden-Trump voters, maybe. But in terms of the ardent base of the Republican Party, they really care only about one thing, and that is sucking up to Trump. And I guarantee you, hear me now, quote me later. I guarantee you, in 2-3 weeks, every single Republican who has spoken up about this, every single prominent Republican who has spoken up about this, is going to come back and say, oh, well, I had concerns, but because of, this legal thing that they did, it's probably fine.
No, like, it's so true. And and that's the worst case scenario. Like, Trump could also just be like, never mind, we're not going to do it. It's too much political effort.
Oh, he's not going to do that.
Well, no, but
he's not going to fucking do that.
But okay, so I do want to take a minute to just talk a little bit about like the specifics of kind of what is happening here. So so the Qatari royal family is planning to give this jet. To be fair, it's a used jet. It's 13 years old, so I'm surprised Trump is jumping at the bit for it, but it is worth $400 million.
It has like 9 bathrooms in it.
No, yeah, it does. It has 3 lounges, 2
It has
bedrooms.
a fucking bidet.
Yeah.
It is a master bedroom.
Bidets are not that fancy.
In an airplane? In an airplane.
But
it has showers.
It's got 5 galleys and a golden staircase. I think a bidet is like the least of the luxuries.
But it's a plane.
Yeah, no,
it's
you're
a
right.
plane.
You're right.
You're not supposed to have a bidet in a fucking plane. I can't even pronounce bidet.
It's true. Yeah, you're right.
If I can't even fucking pronounce it, it shouldn't be in a plane.
That's true. That's true. And that is how they decide what goes into planes.
Whether or not Nathan can pronounce it.
Yeah. So that's a pretty nice fucking plane. And Trump obviously loves it because this has apparently been in the works for a while because he literally got to tour the plane in February at an airport in West Palm Beach. So he clearly likes this thing, and it's clearly a gift that is really fucking nice. A little higher than the $400 that he's allowed to accept. And so the way that they're basically attempting to get around that is by saying that this will be like a new Air Force One. Now, to be clear, a $400 million jet, not that much compared to an Air Force One. Trump already has the most expensive private plane in the world. Each Air Force One costs $660 million. And so basically, they're trying to claim that they're going to take this jet and they're going to retrofit it to become a part of the Air Force One fleet. And Trump's claim is that, like, even though they have already gotten contracts to Boeing to produce 2 new Air Force Ones for a total cost of $3.9 billion, which seems like a lot of fucking money for a plane. But so even though they already have that deal, right, they're going to try to add in this other one in order to be able to accept this thing. But the thing is, Nathan already mentioned some of the security concerns, right? And basically that's led everyone to conclude that you would essentially need to entirely disassemble the plane in order for it even to have a chance of being able to be accepted here. And that it's basically a fantasy that they would ever be able to use it as an Air Force One. But the other thing is that it would take several years. Trump's only got like 3.5 more years to go and counting.
Hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But it would also cost $1 billion. So, yeah, we get a $400 million quote-unquote free jet that we would be stupid to reject, except it's going to cost us $1 billion to retrofit it.
Yeah. And at the end of his term, it's going to get donated to the Trump Presidential Library, which basically just means it's going to be his own private plane.
Yes, exactly. And so while they think they've skirted around like these gift acceptance rules because the Air Force can accept it on behalf of the U.S. government, to Nathan's point, a legal expert told factcheck.org that while the gift would be legal, donating it to the Trump Library would be illegal. And it would be illegal for it to be made available to the president at all for his personal use. But something we should think about is that literally the fucking Supreme Court concluded last year that that nothing the president does is illegal if he's acting as the president while he's doing it. And so there's really no reason to think that after we get this plane and it's retrofitted and all that stuff that he's not going to be able to just go, yeah, I think it's mine now. So yeah.
Another day, another 10 impeachable offenses.
And now it's time for a more lighthearted segment, Tips for Good. So Nathan, why do we do Tips for Good every week?
Well, Michael, I'm so glad you asked, because we do Tips for Good every week because just give me a reason. Just a little bit's enough. Just a second, we're not broken, just bent. And we can learn to love again.
Wow, that's really nice. I almost cried.
Yeah. You know what? I honestly, every single time I see you, I learn to love again.
Oh, that's so nice. So you've fallen out of love with me every time you don't see me. That's so superficial. You're just doing it for my looks. Ugh.
Well, I can't resist that mustache. Like. I can't resist that strong chin of yours.
Dude, I have to say you're not beating the soy boy allegations from our YouTube. But you know what? Learning to love again.
Hey, you know what? Real quick. I drink straight up fucking raw milk.
Raw milk, bitch. He's part of that.
I grew up. Yeah. But yeah, by the way, real quick, can everybody stop putting raw milk drinkers and anti-vaxxers in the same category?
Sure.
All right. We're not with those fuckers. All right.
Sure.
We're like we might be ballsy, but we're not fucking idiots.
Sure. Gotcha. Well, for another tip for good, maybe.
Yeah, that's the tip for good. No. But anyway, love. Yeah, that makes the world a better place, doesn't it?
Cool. Yeah,
we
sure
were
does.
talking about love. Yeah.
Well, we can talk about making the world a better place.
Let's do that. Let's do
idea.
that instead of talking about raw milk.
Nice.
So, what is our tip for good? What is our tip for good this week?
I changed this one up on you, Nathan. I know when we had our planning call, it was one thing, but I'm switching it because of personal events. And that is, if you have had student loans in the past, right now, pause this episode, go to studentaid.gov, and check out the status of your student loans. Because, like, with the stopping and the starting of student loan repayments over the last couple of years, we have all gotten, maybe somewhat out of the habit of paying our student loans or whatever. For me, I had auto pay set up on all my student loan servicers, right? So they would just automatically withdraw from my account all the time. Well, back in January, unbeknownst to me, my student loan was transferred from my servicer to the Department of Education. However, not all the information was transferred, like my auto pay information, which meant that when I went to my servicer's website, and they didn't notify me of this, which means when I went to my servicer's website, it showed a balance of 0. I was like, sweet, one of my student loans finally paid off. Ideal. And until I get a notification on my credit report that the student loan is past due because I have not been paying it, because it was on auto pay and I was never notified that it was turned off. And so basically I had no idea that I had this like outstanding student loan that was like not being paid, which, I would have paid. So all that to say, there is like, you might have different servicers, you might have different people that take care of your federal student loans, but the source of truth for your federal student loans is studentaid.gov. So go there to make sure that you're up to date, that you're paying what you think you're paying, and that the status of your student loans makes sense to you. Because ultimately, like, it's something that can really catch you by surprise. The worst time for that to happen is when you're trying to like do some kind of, important financial thing, like get a mortgage. So go to studentaid.gov and make sure you know the status of your student loans.
Shit, I need to do that now.
Yeah.
And that's Tips for Good.
So for our next segment, we're evaluating whether Trump has solved the healthcare crisis in the United States, or at least one tiny little part of it, with an executive order that he put out on Monday, which attempts to coax pharmaceutical companies in order to lower their prices in the United States. And so when I first saw this news, I was like, damn, is this actually good things coming out of the Trump administration to try to reduce the cost of prescription drugs for Americans who pay up to 10 times more for medications than people in other wealthy nations? So we wanted to dive into it and figure out if that actually is a good thing that Trump is trying to pull off.
Yeah. So one thing I will say is that it's complicated, and I don't actually have a definitive answer for you. For the most part, my final conclusion is going to be somewhat speculative, but also speculative that could potentially be proven wrong. All right. And there are definitely pieces of evidence to support this being something that might actually be significant. And there are some pieces of evidence to support that this might just be a big nothing. So I'm going to kind of walk you all through kind of my whole process in terms of seeing this and how the picture started to kind of shape up the more I was looking at this. So let's start out with the speech that Trump gave, kind of presenting this. It started out basically with Trump talking about an experience that he had with a friend of his who apparently is extremely fat, and he felt the need to keep harping on that this friend is really fat, who was using what Trump called a fat shot. And he was in Britain and found that it was significantly less expensive in Britain than it is in the United States. Now, I'm not sure which drug he's talking about, whether it's like Wegovy or whatnot. But it is true, as Michael pointed out, that drugs in the United States tend to be much more expensive than drugs in other countries. On average, they're usually about 3 times as expensive. As Michael pointed out, sometimes they can be upwards of 10 times as expensive. As it stands currently, about 90% of prescription drugs are actually off-brand. However, the off-brand drugs only account for a fifth of our overall spending, which means that when
Wow.
you're looking at that 10%, which are going to be your drugs that basically pharmaceutical companies own patents on and are able to jack the prices way up on, things like insulin. When you're looking at stuff like that, that's where they really price gouge us. Now, when Trump was talking about this, he made a statement, and this was kind of my first thought of, oh, this might actually be bullshit.
Yeah.
He made a statement where he said basically that the reason why the United States pays so much in drugs in compared to other countries is because other countries are, they're not paying their fair share.
Sure.
We are subsidizing other countries.
Yeah. Which
now
might be
this
true in theory, but is not true in fact, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, So this is actually a sentiment that is often echoed by the pharmaceutical industry. So there was a pharmaceutical lobbyist in response to this, a guy named Stephen J. Ubi, I think that's how you say his name, who is the president and CEO of Pharma. And he basically echoed that same sentiment, that the reason why Americans pay so much more in drugs is specifically because the rest of the world pays so much less. Now, there are many reasons why that's wrong, and there are many easy ways in which we can demonstrate that that is just factually incorrect. First off, on its face, that makes it sound like, oh, so what you're saying is that the pharmaceutical industry just randomly decided, well, one of these countries is going to have to pick up the slack. I guess it's going to be the United States. That's not how it fucking works. So in most countries, there is one regulatory body that is able to set the prices of pharmaceutical drugs. Now, in some cases, it could be because there is a single payer system, which means that, there's only one buyer, which means they have a significant amount of purchasing power. Mm-hmm. In some cases, if we're talking about mandate systems, it might be a specific government agency that will regulate those. But the problem is, because we have this multi-tiered system of various different private companies that have very little insight, and there's very little oversight, and there's very little oversight on the pharmaceutical industry as a whole when it comes to pricing. The prices tends to be set through negotiations with those individual private insurers. And because of that, because there's a lot of competition there between those private insurers, that means that the pharmaceutical industry, on the drugs that they have patents over, have a lot of negotiating power when it comes to the prices.
Yeah.
So basically, let's think of it this way. Say there are 10 private insurance companies, and there is a pharmaceutical company that has a specific drug that is heavily needed to fight some common disease, right? When that pharmaceutical company goes to these insurance companies and says, all right, well, this needs to be a part of your coverage because people are going to specifically need it, and they will choose your insurance company or your specific plan because it will cover this. However, we're going to set it at this price. Then the insurance company says, well, that's too much. We're not going to pay that. And the pharmaceutical person can basically say, okay, well, then I'll just go to the 10 other people that can, or the 9 other people that can. Because there's almost no negotiating power and the federal government does very little regulation, the United States pays significantly more. In order for the idea of the United States actually subsidizing other countries, in order for that idea to be true, that would basically have to mean that the profit margins of pharmaceutical industries would be about in line with the profit margins of other industries. So let's look at the profit margins of pharmaceutical companies versus other companies. So there was actually a study that was done in the JAMA network that was comparing the profit margin. Now, in this case, keep in mind, profit margin means when we're looking at profit margin, you're looking at your revenue, but you are subtracting from that your labor costs and your non-labor costs. Labor costs being the salaries of the people that are working for you, non-labor costs being, anything else. It could be advertisement, it could be research and development, anything that is not a part of that, anything that is not paid into labor or non-labor costs is then kept as profit, right? So as it stands, when this study was looking at 357 S&P traded companies that were not part of the pharmaceutical industry, they found that those S&P companies tended to have a 37.4% profit margin, meaning that 37.4% of the revenue that they were getting did not have to be used for those, either those labor costs or those non-labor costs. They were able to just pocket that. That's your general area for these major S&P companies. Now, if it were true that these pharmaceutical companies that have to charge Americans significantly more, if it was true that the only reason why they have to do that is because they're just, they have so much cost. There's so much cost involved. They're chopping at the bit for those profits, and they just got to do that in order to be even somewhat profitable. Then their profit margin would be somewhat in line with the S&P companies, right? Right?
Yeah, if not lower. Yeah,
if not lower. Yeah, except this same study found that for pharmaceutical companies, they tended to have a profit margin of 76.5%, meaning that 76.5% of the revenue they were taking in went to profits. Again, compare that to 37.4% for the S&P companies that were looked at. Their profit margins are not an issue here. They have, the pharmaceutical industry is uniquely profitable. And the reason for that is because of price gouging. So we've talked about this before, all right? Just to very briefly go through the process, we've talked about how pharmaceutical drugs tend to be developed in the United States. Basically, when it comes to the early funding of drugs, back when they're the most risky because we don't know if they're actually going to develop into something, that tends to be funded by the government. It tends to be funded in the form of grants to universities. Then, when a drug starts to show promise, these companies will basically sweep in, buy the patents, and then develop it the rest of the way once they have determined that this is not going to be super risky for us. Mm-hmm. All right, which means that every single new developed drug in the last decade has at some point of the process, and like I said, normally the point of the process is when it's at its most risky, has been funded by taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Which means that they're basically sweeping in and taking advantage of the tax money that you put in order to fund the development of these drugs, and then they are price gouging you at the back end, and they are pocketing 76.5% of the revenue that they take in from that. They are pocketing that as profit.
Yeah.
Which is almost double the profit margins of other industries.
What I was so surprised at in this order as well is that Trump got that right. It was so weird. He was close on so much of the stuff. He said, quote, "The United States has, for far too long, turned its back on Americans who unwittingly sponsor both drug manufacturers and other countries."
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, these entities today rely on price markups on American consumers, generous public subsidies for research and development, primarily through the National Institutes of Health, and robust public financing of prescription drug consumption through federal and state healthcare programs. It was like, yes, dude, go Donald.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's 100% right about that. Now, he did say at one point during his speech that, again, he tried to make it seem like the reason why we were paying so much is because we were subsidizing other countries. As I just laid out for you, that's a complete bullshit talking point. So he's wrong about that. But the other stuff, he is 100% right about.
Yeah,
right? Everything else he's 100% right about.
It is so funny because he gets so close on diagnosing the problem. and then takes this crazy left turn to blame other countries. Like he said in the executive order, it said, quote, Americans should not be forced to subsidize low-cost prescription drugs and biologics in other developed countries and face overcharges for the same products in the United States. And also, like, during his announcement, he literally talked about the fact that the healthcare companies, referring to the drug makers, should make about the same amount of money. And quote said, I'm not knocking the drug companies. I'm really more knocking the other countries. So it's so frustrating that it was like, okay, dude, I'm ready to give you credit for diagnosing this problem correctly, and then takes this wild left turn to blame other countries that have stronger negotiating positions because they have like more robust centralized healthcare systems.
Yeah. To which, the part of the solution for us would be to have a more centralized healthcare system, which is not what he's proposing. But here's the thing, like, we're not comparing this to the ideal. We're comparing this to the status quo.
So
all right.
true.
And look, we try to be fair. We've been accused of Trump derangement syndrome in the past.
Yeah.
But we try to be fair. If he does a policy that we think is actually going to help, we'll give him credit. And here's the thing that actually did give me a little bit of pause about this. And this is something that should give you pause about this as well, because when I first heard him say, "Oh, well, I'm knocking other countries," that made me think, okay, so does that mean that your order is basically just going to be try to raise the prices of other countries, or like, force companies to sell to raise their prices on other countries? That's not what the order says.
Yeah.
To be fair, that is not what the order says. Basically, it calls for, in 30 days, the companies, the pharmaceutical companies, need to come up with a plan to sell their drugs at the same rate as comparable countries, like the comparable lowest cost for other countries. All right. So if basically the lowest cost that this has for X country, you have to offer us that price in the United States. And one thing that gave me pause, that same CEO that I quoted earlier, who basically said that the reason why prices were so high in America was because we were subsidizing other countries, the same guy actually criticized this executive order. He said, quote, importing foreign crisis from socialist countries would be a bad deal for American patients and workers. It would be less treatment and cures and would jeopardize the hundreds of billions our member companies are planning to invest in America. So the fact that he's against it, this order, should actually somewhat make you think, oh, maybe this order might actually be good, because this is a corporate lobbyist. This is a guy who's paid to lie to you.
Yeah.
He's a guy who's paid to try to keep the status quo where pharmaceutical companies are jacking up prices as much as possible. And it's hilarious that when he says socialist countries, he's literally just referring to every single developed country that isn't the United States.
Yeah. Totally.
So, by this logic, every single country that isn't the United States is just a socialist country, which is
makes
just
me think
stupid
maybe we should try out socialism. Maybe we'd finally get some good trains.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. When you say shit like that, that doesn't make us think that those countries are bad. That makes us think that socialism is good.
Yeah, we've been to
and I
some
don't think
other
you want us to
countries,
do
so-
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I haven't, but
Yeah.
but yeah. So that kind of gave me pause. But then you actually look at the order itself, and basically after those 30 days, it then instructs the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, RFK Jr., to come up with a plan.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's hard to evaluate this because it's basically a declaration of like, it's like a politics declaration, not a policy declaration. It's like, I wish drug prices were lower. And even in defining that next step, that if they don't make, quote, significant progress that would trigger the Health and Human Services Secretary to make this plan, significant progress is not defined. So it's totally open to the Trump administration going, yep, we did it, and having it just be political posturing. So it's hard to evaluate whether it would actually be effective because it's so vague on what it actually requires.
Yeah. Now, one thing, and I'm actually going to, if this does happen, this is a good thing. But one of the things that this order does actually instruct is that if these pharmaceutical companies do not lower their prices and set them to the the lowest price from other countries, if they do not do that, the order actually does threaten to start investigating them for anti-competitive practices in the United States. And if they did that and actually did a meaningful investigation, like it wasn't just a surface level bullshit, theater, that would actually be a really good thing, because one of the biggest issues in the United States is our patent laws. Our patent laws, as I kind of talked about earlier, allows those corporations that swoop in after a drug has been determined as less risky, that swoop in and buy those patents. They then allow them to basically prevent anybody from creating off-brand versions of that drug, which basically creates no competition. I mean, because here's the thing. There are lots of, you could make the argument that there are two different ways to lower prices. Right? There's the socialist way, and then there's the capitalist way. The socialist way would be for the government to set those prices or negotiate those prices or regulate those prices. The capitalist way would be for multiple different companies to develop the same drug, and then they'd have to compete with each other in terms of what the price of the drug is. But what we have in the United States is basically just the worst of all worlds, where we don't have any regulation, but we also, in many cases, we don't have any competition either.
Yeah.
Because of patent laws. And if the Trump administration actually did a meaningful investigation into anti-competitive practices by pharmaceutical companies, and that actually opened the doors for more off-brand versions of common drugs, of necessary drugs to be developed and thus drive the prices down, that would actually be a really good thing. Like, that would actually make a huge difference. So like, I genuinely hope that they're being serious about that. Yeah. But the issue is, it's hard to really judge what ultimately this is going to come down to, because at the end of the day, the federal government really only is going to have power is going to have buying power over pharmaceuticals bought through Medicare and Medicaid, not through private insurance. Now, the hope seems to be that within that 30 days, out of the kindness of their heart to fill this order, that these pharmaceutical companies are just going to lower it on everybody. But the fact of the matter is, the only negotiating power that a lot of legal experts would agree, the only negotiating power that they're going to have is specifically on drugs that are bought through Medicare and Medicaid, meaning that they would basically set their prices of, okay, well, we're not going to buy it unless it's this price. Yeah. That's what our final thing is going to be, which would still be significant, but most Americans have private insurance plans, which means it's not going to have as much of an effect. And it's definitely, Trump is claiming that this is going to have an immediate effect. It's definitely not going to have an immediate effect. And even if that plan is created, it would take years to implement. And honestly, what's most likely, the thing that is most likely to actually create meaningful negotiation of pharmaceutical prices, not just for Medicare and Medicaid, but also for private insurance, would actually be legislation. But that's going to take even longer, because Republicans are not going to be for that. Now, look, if Trump uses his bully pulpit to try to bully Republicans into supporting an actual decent piece of legislation that forces pharmaceutical negotiation, that would be great. If he actually does that, that would be great. And I would be I'll come on the pod and I will sing his praises. But here's the issue with this. Kind of like what he referred to, kind of the same way that he referred to his healthcare plan in the debate. This executive order is a concept of a plan. Yeah. It's not a plan. It is a concept of a plan. Now, its goals are good. All right. Its goals are good. The goal of setting pharmaceutical prices in line with that other countries pay, that is a good goal, and that is an important goal. But he doesn't really have any mechanism for actually for actually doing it, and he doesn't have a meaningful plan for how to actually force that. So what I think that this is, what I think that this ultimately is this is going to give him something that he can bring back to his people, to his constituency, and basically say, hey, look what I did. We passed an executive order and it totally lowered your pharmaceutical prices. And, we know that at the end of the day, facts don't matter to his most ardent base. So he can tell them, oh yeah, so your insulin no longer costs like, $500. And they're going to be like, oh my God, it no longer costs $500. So I think that I think that it's possible that nothing's going to come from this, and he knows that nothing's going to come from it, but he's still going to use it in order to try to score political points, because he knows that negotiating pharmaceutical prices is popular among both Democrats and Republicans. And then when Democrats criticize him for it, he's going to be like, oh, so you're against this thing. You're against this thing because I'm for this thing. All right. I can't do anything with I can't do anything right. You're never going to give me credit for anything. It's like, okay, but you didn't actually do anything. I honestly think that's ultimately where this is going. I hope that I'm wrong. I genuinely hope that I'm wrong. And if the Trump administration does actually succeed in lowering prices to a significant degree, I'll come on the pod, say I was wrong, sing his praises.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, this is just a concept of a plan.
And now it's time for one of our favorite segments,
Ass Hat of the Week.
So, Nathan, who is our ass hat this week?
Michael, I could not be more excited to present this week's ass hat. It is Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. REK, come on down.
Wow. That's really so exciting.
Yeah.
We're finally on the show. I can't believe it's taken this long for him to be an ass hat.
He hasn't been an ass hat yet, and I you know what?
That's
I'm sad. I'm disappointed in him for not rising to that level just yet. I mean, we did do an entire segment about how much of an asshole he was after the autism comments.
Yeah.
So I guess that was just a prolonged ass hat segment. But no, he deserves an honorary award
for sure. All right. So what did Robert fucking Kennedy do to get on our show?
All right. So this is one of those things. This is one of those ass hatty segments where it's kind of like so you know that you're full of shit, and yet you still accept a certain position of power. Now, I considered making this a D-bag award or a miscellaneous what the fuck, but at the end of the day, I think ass hat works for this, because it comes down to the fact that this is a guy who thinks that he is qualified to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services. And he says shit like this. So he was in a hearing where he was asked about measles. Now, it's important to note that measles has been making a resurgence, and in large part, it's actually in primary part, not even in large part, in primary part, it's because people are refusing to fucking vaccinate their kids for measles. I do not think it is unreasonable to say that the fact that our Health and Human Services Secretary frequently spreads misinformation about vaccines, I don't think it's unreasonable to say that has something to do with it. So he was asked if he would today vaccinate his kids for measles. And in response, he said, "My opinions about vaccines are irrelevant. I don't want to seem like I'm being evasive, but I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me."
I'm just the person that establishes medical advice in this country.
Bro, you are the secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services. What the fuck do you mean we shouldn't be taking medical advice from you? Now, I agree that we shouldn't be taking medical advice from you, but you accepted the fucking nomination.
Yeah.
You accepted the nomination.
It's like, I really didn't think this job would involve medicine. I don't know what I was supposed to do with that.
Like, okay, again, the reason why this makes him an asshat is just the mere gall of the fact that this guy clearly fucking knows that he is full of shit.
Yep.
He clearly knows that the shit that he says is wrong, and he still is in this position. He still accepted this position. All right. Look, if someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you want to be the head of the Department of Health and Human Services?" You know what I would say? Fuck no, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified for that. I'm more qualified for that than RFK, which isn't saying much. A fucking dead llama is more qualified to be the head of the Department of Health and Human Services than fucking RFK.
Yeah, because llamas are required to get vaccines.
Yeah, but this one's dead, so he forgot to.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, like I can't fucking believe the gall of this man. I mean, I don't even know what else to say. Like, this guy literally said, people shouldn't be taking medical advice from me. Then fucking resign. Resign.
So congratulations to Robert fucking Kennedy for being this week's
Ass Hat of the Week.
And now we will end our show as we usually do with our highlights. So Nathan, what's your highlight this week?
Bro, I'm finally on summer break.
Good for you, man. That's exciting.
Grades are all in, and it was a doozy of a semester, but it's all in. Summer break. Time to focus on being a dad.
Nice. That's awesome.
What about you, Mikes? What's your highlight?
I think my highlight is that I went out and went to the bouldering gym, so like the climbing gym yesterday, and that was really fun. I haven't been climbing in a while, and I always kind of forget how much I love doing it. So it was so fun to get out there and just climb. So that was really fun.
Dude, climbing is so fun.
So now we will thank the amazing people that make this show possible. So thank you to our amazing patrons, Jerry DeViller, Taylor Bloom, Fade Out Scoop, Kyle Chaska, and Tobias Janssen. And thank you to our amazing editor, Kayla, for all they do to make this show possible. And thank you, dear listener, for listening to The Perspectrum. And you'll hear from us again